Nationwide protests took place on Thursday in Kenya against plans to raise an extra $2.7 billion through additional taxes. Police fired tear gas and water cannons to disperse demonstrators, and over 200 people have reportedly been injured. Protesters want the government to abandon its finance bill, saying the tax raises will hurt the economy and raise the cost of living for Kenyans who are already struggling to make ends meet. A Kenyan parliamentary panel on Tuesday urged the government to scrap some new taxes proposed in its finance bill, including new ones on car ownership, on bread, on cooking oil, as well as financial transactions. Well, to take this discussion further, let's welcome Dr. Westin Shilo, who's an international relations scholar at the University of the Witwatersrand here in Johannesburg. Doctor, a very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for your time. Look, what is the primary objective of the financial bill? And where do you think the issues is with the main provisions of this bill that have now sparked opposition as well as widespread protests?
Thank you so much, Alicia, for the invite. Well, this bill is meant to help the government collect revenue to run its affairs, to meet the pressing needs of the people. But that is not the crux of the problem. The crux of the problem is that President William Ruto has squandered the goodwill that propelled him into power in 2022. He rose to power on a platform of reform, of responding to the needs of the poor Kenyans, of the workers, of the students, of the jobless people. He has not lived up to that promise. And what Kenyans are saying through this protest is that they don't see what the money that the government collects does, because the health infrastructure is in a shambles. The education sector is in a shambles. The agricultural sector is in a shambles. Basically, the government collects money, but the money is wasted. So the protests are about government wastage, President William Ruto's inability to live up to his promises when he campaigned in 2022 to better the lot of the poor people. And therefore, Kenyans are saying, you are taxing us a lot, but the money only serves to cushion, to sustain high-profile lifestyles of the political elite and their cronies, and they're opposed to that.
Let's talk about the main groups or stakeholders, Doctor, that are leading these protests against the bill. I mean, reports are indicating now that one person has since been killed, over 200 others injured, while hundreds have since been arrested, and these figures could still increase. So are you witnessing basically a rejection from the state to adequately address some of the issues that has been raised by the protesters?
Yes, Alicia, that also points to the anger that is manifesting through this protest. First, President William Ruto promised to do away with state violence, extrajudicial executions, and other state excesses by the police and other state apparatus, which have characterized the Kenyan state for the last 6 decades plus, basically since the independence in 1963. And therefore, it's unfortunate that these protests are being met with brutal force. Lives have been lost, people have been maimed. And that's basically the practices that his predecessors used to engage in. And therefore, one thing that comes out is that these protests are organic. That's what makes them unique. In the past, protests of this nature would be organized by the political elite, especially the opposition. This time around, they're very organic. There's no leader, as it were. Kenyans across the board, ethnic lines, regional lines, class lines, are united against the government of President William Ruto.
I mean, Doctor, it's quite concerning. Putting almost a 17% tax on bread, sanitary towels, the bare necessities as well as staples is rather exorbitant. So how might the passage of this bill then impact the country's economy in the short as well as long term? And what are some of the potential political, geopolitical consequences for the current government if the bill is actually passed or even blocked?
Well, Alicia, I think the bill will pass because of elite pacting in Kenya. The political elite, whether those in the opposition or those in government, usually close ranks against ordinary people. So this bill has gone through the first reading, the second reading, and it's gone through. So I don't think it's going to be blocked. What you ask about the far-reaching political ramifications of if the bill was to pass and be enacted into law is that William Ruto is likely to encounter a groundswell of protests. They are not going to abate. They are likely to continue. And he would be lucky if the government stands. If it does, then come next elections, I don't think he will be re-elected.
All right. And in closing, then, Doctor, what steps could then the government take in order to address some of the concerns by the protesters while still, of course, pursuing the necessary financial reforms for the country?
Well, Kenya is asking for austerity measures that the president has been talking about to be implemented. They don't see the government living within its means. They don't see a government acting as if it's conscious of the dire situation that the rest of the Kenyans are living in. For instance, the other day, the president went to the US on a state visit, a trip that cost $1.5 million US, and Kenya was asking for what? The political elite are walking around with raw cash, going into churches and donating money, living large, whereas the rest of the Kenyans are wallowing in poverty, joblessness. So the government must first uphold the rule of law. There are many offices in government that are not contemplated in the Constitution. That is impunity. Secondly, the president must desist from behaving like his predecessors, who thought that the easiest way to rule and govern in Kenya is basically to buy off the political elite. No, this is not going to work. He has to respond to the constituency that propelled him into power, the poor people. That Hustler dynasty narrative that he, came up with during the campaigns. That kind of consciousness is still alive in Kenyans, and it's what is likely to cost him politically. Kenyans are saying, no, we can no longer be divided into meaningless, tribal, regional, religious, ethnic enclaves. They have got cross-cutting concerns about food security, about jobs, about education, about healthcare. And they're saying the government must respond to those interests. Secondly, the president must stop acting as if he is accountable to external actors. Kenyans are expressing a lot of concern that since President Ruto was elected, he seems to listen more to Washington. He seems to listen more to the Bretton Woods institutions. And they're citing these punitive tax measures as being imposed on Kenya courtesy of the IMF and the World Bank. And I think they did not elect the IMF, they did not elect the World Bank, they did not elect the US ambassador in Nairobi. So they're asking the president to desist from pandering to external interest and serve the Kenyan people who elected him.
Absolutely, Doc. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Very interesting observations there, saying that business should not, of course, be the influence or the overall influence over government. Dr. Weston Shilaho, the international relations scholar at Wits University, giving us some insight on the current Kenyan tax protest.